there's roughly 80,000 Somalis in Minnesota, and less than 100 have been convicted of the fraud, but the vast majority have been Somalis. And I'd go back to, and by the way, having worked in the food manufacturing sector for 20 years, and oftentimes in operating plants, I've worked with a lot of immigrants from all over the world. And my grandmother was born in Naples, and probably all of us, to a certain extent, unless we're Native Americans, are products of, we're immigrants at some point. So I am pro-immigrant in that respect. But as far as the Somali population or any population, I think what we need to do is just follow the law and enforce the law. And I think one thing that causes me, let's say, great frustration is, it's at the federal level sometimes, but also at the state level, people just need to stay in their lane and do their job the best they can. The legislature needs to pass the laws. The executive needs to faithfully execute the laws. The police need to enforce the law. And the prosecutors need to prosecute the laws. And we get into problems when, let's say, a governor or a mayor and the executive looks at the law as almost like a menu or a buffet line, like, all right, I'm gonna follow this law, I'm gonna disregard that one. It just messes up the whole system.
Welcome to a brand new episode of the Michele Tafoya podcast. Please do me a favor. Just one little favor. Click that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We're in the midst of a series that we've been dropping here for the last month or so of the gubernatorial candidates running against Tim Walz in Minnesota. So these are all Republicans. Obviously, Tim Walz is running on the Democrat ticket. He has not accepted an invitation to join us, but all of the Republican candidates had. And today is Patrick Knight, a guy with an extraordinary background, grew up in Plymouth, Minnesota, which is a suburb in Hennepin County. Public school guy, ended up in the armed services, was a judge advocate in Okinawa, Japan, later an infantry officer deployed in the Middle East, retired as a lieutenant colonel, and then became the CEO of an agribusiness company here in Minnesota. He's a dad of 4. He's got one kid who, as you'll hear, actually interned for Amy Klobuchar, the Democrat senator from Minnesota, one of the 2 Democrat senators. And but this guy is running as a Republican for governor. So meet Patrick Knight. Again, this is one more in our series of interviews with the Republican gubernatorial candidates here in Minnesota. Patrick Knight, our guest, next. Patrick, I gave people, first of all, welcome. I gave people sort of an overview. You've got an incredible resume. And this is such an interesting time. There are so many people jumping into this gubernatorial race on the Republican side here in Minnesota. Clearly, people see an opportunity given the struggles of the current governor and his administration. Why do you want to be governor?
Well, that's the first question I get, why I'm running, and the second question is specifically why governor. So let me answer the first one. Why I'm running is I love Minnesota. I'm from here. I grew up here. I've always taken it as a point of pride to be a Minnesotan, and I think the state's going in the wrong direction. And I think people are hurting, and it feels like nobody's doing anything about it. And that's before we even talk about the fraud or the size of the government. And I was taught, if something isn't working, step up and do something about it, and that's why I'm running. And as far as why governor, people say, well, that's a big job with a lot of leadership requirements and a lot of responsibility, and I say, well, that's what I've been doing for the last 30 years. I spent 20 years in the Marine Corps, active duty and reserves, deployed to the Middle East, retired as a lieutenant colonel. I originally started as a judge advocate, but switched to infantry. And the best job I ever had was a rifle company commander in charge of about 200 people. And I quickly learned the value of leadership. Thankfully, I had some really good mentors. But if you cannot lead, you're quickly ushered out and somebody will replace you, because there's a lot of good leaders, as you can imagine, in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, okay. I got to ask you, what is a judge advocate?
It's an attorney. So I'd gone to
kind of like JAG, or
exactly. Yeah, in the Marine Corps they call them judge advocates. In the Navy they call them JAGs.
Got it.
There's a slight difference in the Marine Corps. You have to be a line officer first, so you go through 6 months of infantry training before you go to Naval Justice School. So,
got it.
but
Well, so what did you like so much about the best job you ever had, and leading a group of 200 men? I have often told you about my friends at besthotgrill.com. They are doing something they rarely do, which is to hold a sale on their Solaire infrared grills. From November 24th through December 5th, they're offering a 25% discount off their Solaire Anywhere and Solaire Everywhere portable infrared grills. These, I got to tell you, are the perfect gift for a college student, a tailgater, someone who loves to boat, an RVer, a picnicker, or just a foodie, or for you. Don't you deserve the best under the tree this season? Also through December 5th, when you purchase a 27-inch or larger Solaire infrared grill, you will receive for free a stainless steel griddle and a quality USA-made cover to protect your investment. That's up to a $650 value. Now imagine not only grilling juicy and tasty food, but also making eggs, pancakes, smash burger, fajitas, pizza, anything you would like on your free professional style griddle. Go to besthotgrill.com to learn more about USA-made Solaire infrared grills and their Black Friday Cyber Monday sale. That's besthotgrill.com. Buy Solaire infrared grills on sale through December 5th at besthotgrill.com. What did you like so much about the best job you ever had, and leading a group of 200 men?
Well, it was, to me, it was like the ultimate in leadership. It was a small enough unit that you got to know a lot of the Marines, but it was big enough that you had a lot of tools in your arsenal, so to speak. There's a lot of different moving parts. There'd be typically three rifle platoons, a weapons platoon, headquarters and support platoon, all different functions. So it really required the broad range of skill sets to understand how to not only lead and manage the organization, but then how to use those tools, those assets, whether it's the people or the equipment. It was just very fulfilling.
So right now in Minnesota, you talked about the state going in the wrong direction. What would be your top three priorities if you were to become governor?
Well, I think of it's a fairly simple equation, and a flourishing society needs three things: a strong economy, a good education system, and the rule of law. And that's not me just making it up. It starts with Aristotle, goes through the Roman Republic, goes through the Founding Fathers, and the Federalist Papers, James Madison, and comes to today. And I think of it as a very powerful equation, which is you need economic growth that creates opportunity, and then you need education that allows people to capture that opportunity, and then you need the rule of law that allows people to protect and nurture that opportunity. And if they're all working, you get a virtuous cycle that reinforces everything. But those are the three elements. So the three things I do, I'd start to improve the economy, whether it's regulatory reform, tax reform, permitting reform. I'd focus on improving schools, and Minnesota schools, unfortunately, have been falling over the last 8 years, despite us having a governor who has a lengthy experience in education. So I would get us back to core curricula, improve school choice, reduce mandates. And then on crime, I think that's a fairly easy fix. If the city, it's particularly in Minneapolis and the more broader counties of Hennepin and Ramsey, I think that's something that can be fixed fairly quickly if the city wanted to, or the county wanted to. But if not, the state has tools to address that as well.
So the state can say, hey, Hennepin County, which is, for people who don't live in Minnesota, it encompasses a great deal of the metro, Minneapolis and the suburbs. If Hennepin County says, no, we don't want to cooperate with you, what do you do then as governor?
Well, the governor does have the state patrol, and if you look at the areas on the map in Minneapolis, or more broadly Hennepin County, there's certain areas that are high crime, and so the state patrol can surge into those areas. The governor also controls the Bureau of Criminal Apprehensions, the BCA, which is almost like the state's FBI, the investigatory resources. The governor can plus that up. There's also state and county and federal task forces that can be deployed if the city, in this case, isn't going to do their job, let's say, and staff up their police department and enforce the laws. So I think those are at least three things that the governor could have a pretty quick impact on.
Right now, if you say the word, if you utter the term Minnesota, almost anywhere in the country, people are going to say, oh, fraud, Tim Walz and fraud. How responsible do you think Tim Walz is for what's transpired here? And again, for people who may not know, probably well over $1 billion of taxpayer money funneled to fraudulent groups who never provided the services they said they were providing, and much of that money going to Kenya, China, and Somalia.
Yep, and that's a billion with a B, just to emphasize that point. And it all stops with Governor Walz. I mean, that's part of the role of leadership, and I'm sure Governor Walz learned it in the first day of boot camp. I know he was in the National Guard, that if something is going well, you give the credit to your team if you're the leader. And if you're the leader and something is not going well, in fact, it's gone wrong, even if it wasn't your fault, you take responsibility.
It's like a coach or a quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. And Governor Walz seems to be doing the exact opposite. And I think of my role as, most recently, I was CEO of a food manufacturing company, a little over 100 employees. We're selling different food, snack foods and so forth, competing against big multinational companies. And, as a role of CEO, you're supposed to be the steward of your company's resources. And part of that is putting in proper accounting controls and compliance mechanisms and so forth. And if a private company's CEO would misspend anything outside the norm, you would be fired. And not only that, you'd probably be sued for liability for breaching the duty of care, or sometimes called the fiduciary duty. So there's real world consequences in the private sector. Of course, there is in the public sector. That's elections. And that's why 2026 is so important.
It's a midterm election. It's already tough for Republicans in Minnesota. We all know that, for a variety of reasons. But at the moment, it looks like there might be an opening. We've had single party rule here in Minnesota. Right now, our state assembly is split at the House level. It's closer than it's been in a while. But why do you think a Republican has a shot at winning the governor's mansion in 2026?
Well, I think the path to victory is fairly clear for a Republican, and I think it's focused on the core issues that, unfortunately for the state of Minnesota, we are going the wrong direction, and that's affordability, the economy, crime, and education. Just focus like a laser on those, because Minnesota families, regardless of how they vote or what they look like or where they live, those are the issues that matter, and that's where they're suffering. Then number two is we have to win the middle. Governor Pawlenty, who's the last statewide Republican to win state office, he often says, and I agree with him, that if you look at the percentages in Minnesota, Governor Walz has about 46% approval. Republicans generically 42%. So that leaves 12% undecided. And typically about 2/3 break against the incumbent. So that then puts us at 50-50. And so the Republican candidate for statewide office, whether it's for governor or any other statewide seat, needs to get more of those independents, more than 2/3, if he or she wants to win. But then the third piece is it's not enough just to win. We need a candidate that can not only credibly win, but can make the very hard leadership decisions to peel away at least 8 years of bad policy and get education going in the right direction, the economy, and so forth.
When we talk about, we were talking about fraud in Minnesota a moment ago, and Tim Walz, and the Somali community has come under great scrutiny, and disproportionately, the number of people involved in Feeding Our Future, in the autism scandal, in the housing scandal, have been a part of the Somali community. So it's not necessarily unfair to say that this community, again, disproportionately by a mile, committed this fraud. They've become a powerful voting bloc, which is why many people think Tim Walz and company turned the other way and said, fine, we're going to let you do this because we need your votes. You know, we need your votes in Hennepin County and wherever else. What do you think about, how do you address that community? I mean, Jacob Fry decides to speak to them in their own language. A lot of people would like to see all immigrants to this country assimilate and join in being part of what is the great American experiment. So how do you approach that?
Well, I mean, that's partly a federal issue, but from the state level, there's roughly 80,000 Somalis in Minnesota, and less than 100 have been convicted of the fraud, but it is, the vast majority have been Somalis. And I go back to, and by the way, you know, having worked in the food manufacturing sector for 20 years, and oftentimes in operating plants, I've worked with a lot of immigrants from all over the world. And my grandmother was born in Naples, and probably all of us, to a certain extent, unless we're Native Americans, are products of, we're immigrants at some point. So I am pro-immigrant in that respect. But as far as the Somali population or any population, I think what we need to do is just follow the law and enforce the law. And I think one thing that causes me, let's say, great frustration is, it's at the federal level sometimes, but also at the state level, people just need to stay in their lane and do their job the best they can. The legislature needs to pass the laws. The executive needs to faithfully execute the laws. The police need to enforce the law. And the prosecutors need to prosecute the laws. And we get into problems when, let's say, a governor or a mayor and the executive looks at the law as almost like a menu or a buffet line, like, all right, you know, I'm gonna follow this law, I'm going to disregard that one. It just messes up the whole system.
Judges as well. I think we can throw judges in there. We've got a notorious one in Hennepin, and Mary Moriarty, who has decided to let some, even a murderer, walk, because of her ideology. So this is, again, you're right. It'd be nice if people stayed in their lanes. It's gotten to the point where, you know, this is why I think there's so much public mistrust for the judicial system, for politicians, for the government, is people not staying in their lanes and people not being held accountable in that sector. Whereas, as you mentioned earlier, if you're a CEO, if you're a part of any company and you do something illegal, you're not going to last in that company and you might wind up in jail. So I don't know why this is so difficult.
Yeah, I don't know, and the election is the public sector way to address these things for at least people in public office, but it does not work as efficiently when there's not, let's say, aggressive news coverage. And that's one thing why I think Minnesota is benefiting, is now there is national news coverage on the problems, because a lot of Minnesotans, this has been brewing for a few years. It's not a surprise to a lot of us who have been following it. But to the majority of Minnesotans, it is, because it has not been in the local press. It wasn't really until the national news picked it up that people are reading about it.
Right. It took a New York Times article for this to gain, quote unquote, credibility with the mainstream press. And I'm hearing, that even still, some of the network nightly news shows are not focusing on this. And so it is interesting, but people are getting their news a lot of different ways. I'm curious as to how you look at that, because social media has become a major cog in the political wheel of getting to reach voters, talking to voters, communicating your whole campaign. How aggressive are you going to be social media wise?
Well, it's I've got 4 kids, 2 in college and 2 in high school.
They can do it for you.
What's that?
They can do it for you.
Yeah, I know. Well, and I'm learning.
They're really good with their thumbs.
Yeah, it's amazing, and we try to, particularly the younger ones that they've been growing up, is try to restrict their phone use, but that's where they get their information.
It sure is.
And I was at an event last night, and I was talking to one of my colleagues who's late 20s, and he doesn't watch any of the nightly news. He couldn't tell you what channel Fox News is on or CNN. He gets it all through Twitter or all the different platforms. That is now the landscape for the majority of the country, I think.
It is. It is, and it's interesting, and we've got to anyone who's running for office has to kind of figure out a way to maximize that for themselves, because that sure is the way. Usually when people get into a race, and particularly this one, like I said, I've been interviewing all the Republican gubernatorial candidates because Tim Walz won't come on, but the list keeps growing. Like, I think we're done. We can start rolling out this series, and then somebody else gets in. And usually people get in because they see the pool of candidates and they think, not good enough. There's no one in there that can do the job. I think I can do it better. So when you look at the pool of candidates, why do you think you're uniquely positioned?
Yeah, incidentally, last night there was a candidate forum, and 9 of us were on the stage. And just very good people, well-intentioned, many different qualifications and sets of backgrounds. And so I think the more the merrier. It's going to provide better options for the delegates and the voters to compare and contrast about who would be the better candidate. I think all the candidates see the same issues. They have to, because it's so glaring, the issues facing our state. If you look at all of our websites, we basically say the same thing. So I think the differentiator is, all right, who can lead and get this done and make the hard decisions? Because as I mentioned earlier, it's not enough just to win, it's to actually be able to drive results. And that's where I fall back on not just my Marine Corps experience, but my experience running a food manufacturing company. And as a CEO, and basically the last 30 years, my job has been in one form or another to drive results and make hard decisions and lead teams and build teams, create jobs, manage budgets, and so forth. And I think I'm the only one in the race that's got that experience.
Interesting. It's you also have 4 kids, and how do they feel about Dad running for governor?
Well, we talked about it for a good 6 months, and my family's very diverse politically. My oldest daughter, who's a senior in college, actually worked for Amy Klobuchar on Capitol Hill last summer. So you can imagine we've got very good conversations. We have very similar values. I would say we rank the values somewhat differently, but we want the same results. And we try to live by civil dialogue. And so I think I think the kids, they're behind me and energized, and my wife's behind me. That's the most important thing. And it's been a fruitful experience so far.
All right, before I let you go, I'd love to hear your elevator pitch on why Patrick Knight should be the next governor of Minnesota.
Well, because we need to turn it around, and we need results, and we need to deliver for Minnesotans, regardless of where they live or what they look like or even how they vote. Our once great state, the state that produced the 1980 Miracle on Ice hockey team, where 11 of the 20 players were Minnesotans, and the head coach was a Minnesotan, and beat the best hockey team in the world. We can roll up our sleeves, grit our teeth, get back to work, and start delivering results for the people of Minnesota. And by the way, I have to say this, knightgov.com, KNIGHTGOV.com. That's my website.
If you want to go check him out, knightgov.com. You've seen it also on the screen there as we've been talking to Patrick Knight. We appreciate your service. I always like to thank veterans for their service.
Thank you.
I think it's one of the most unbelievable gifts a human can give to a society, to a country. And I end every podcast by saying, be brave and do good. I think it takes a whole hell of a lot of guts to run for office. And it seems to me that everyone that I've interviewed really wants to do some good here. So we appreciate that. Patrick, thank you so much for your time. We'll see you down the road.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You can keep up with the Trump administration when you subscribe to the Trump Report. It's an email that brings you daily highlights from the Oval Office right to your inbox 5 days a week. Subscribe today at SalemPodcastNetwork.com/Trump.